Hey, Christy Fallon, Regional Agronomist for Winfield United here with you today to talk about why we tissue sample. We have to look at a complete approach to plant nutrition. We have to start with the basics at the ground level, with the soil, of course, total nutrients that are in the soil, we start there, but we must add to it the plant tissue because we need to know what it is that the plant is utilizing out of the soil, and it needs to tell us what it needs. So it needs to talk to us and tell us a cool story. That's what happens when we have the plant tissue analysis. So when we have the tissue analysis and they come back, then on the left-hand side here you can see the growth or the percent of the maximum. If we have visual deficiency symptoms on the bottom here, that is not a good day. What we want to have is we want to be in this critical nutrient range right here, what I would call the Goldilocks zone. That's when we're getting our yield is being maximized, but we're not going over the top. We don't want to go to this zone of the luxury consumption because then that's costing us too much money. Our return on our investment goes down for what we're putting into it. And the toxicity is the no-go zone. We really want to stay right here in this critical nutrient range. So in the previous one, it was a chart. You can also see sufficiency ranges in a table format. In this case, this is the nutrient concentrations of the fourth petiole on russet Burbank potatoes. So what we want to go to is we want to have this sufficiency range that's right here. So we can say if we have nitrate nitrogen, for example, it needs to be 15 to 20,000 parts per million at that particular point in time, which was during tuber bulking. If we had it drop down to 12,000, then we would be marginal. So then our yield is not going to be as good. And we can do that same thing for all of the nutrients down the line. So it's important that we collect the same tissue so that we can compare it to the data that's already been done, and we can look at the sufficiency ranges or the critical nutrient ranges to help us keep it in that optimal level for getting good yield and quality. Now the other thing that happens is, and why we have to tissue sample, is you note here and you see that at the beginning in June, we're not doing much at all as far as the nutrient uptake. But then you see this sharp increase and it continues to go up and up and up and up when you're talking about the nitrogen over the growing season. The same with the potassium as you follow it up. Okay, so across the top here you have your vegetative stage, your tuber initiation, tuber bulking, and maturation. Okay, your phosphorus on the other hand is pretty stable. It does go up, but it doesn't take as much of a sharp increase like the other two nutrients do. So not only is it needing to be in a critical range, it needs to be different at different time periods during the growth stage and during the maturation of that plant. You can look at the same sort of thing with corn, and you look at the uptake. We don't have much initially in our first days after planting, but then we see these sharp increases, and then once that we get to the 12 leaf stage up to early tassel, in this zone right in here, you can see that our phosphorus, our nitrogen, and our potassium levels have gone way up. Our potassium levels clear up to 15 pounds of K2O per day and 11 pounds of N per day at that point in time. So we have to plan ahead for some of the grand growth phases and what the crops are going to need. So again, we need to tissue sample accurately, and we need to be utilizing it so that we can get the nutrients on when we need them so that we can get maximum yield and quality. So for corn, there are very much critical time periods for it. Early on is when the number of rows are being developed. Then right before VT is your potential number of kernels. The whole time, root development, kernel weights at the end. What are the two most critical growth stages in a corn plant's life? Right at the very beginning and at VT. So don't mess with it not having the nutrients it needs at those point in time. as well as others. The other one would be right in here at B5, B6. You see that's where the number of rows are being determined, so yield is being determined. We can put on some nutrients at that point in time. So that's really important. So why do we care? What does the stress do, not having enough nutrients and having poor conditions? You can see this plant here of the stress during emergence. So now you're going to have an uneven stand and you're not going to have the same maturity across the field. If you have stress at pollination, then you get very much where you have the corn that is not formed well. So when you look at the nutrition and all of the interactions that go on, it is very much of a complex web. When you have one is impacted, it will impact another. For our heavily manured soils with our dairies, you can have phosphorus that gets put on, which we need, and that's a good thing. But if you get too much, then it actually, you can see the tie with zinc here. So you can actually have a zinc deficiency that can be induced by having too much phosphorus in the system. So again, this is another reason why we have to test what's in the plant, and we need it to tell us what it needs and what it has too much of so that we can keep everything in balance. So how can a tissue analysis build yield? It helps us to diagnose the crop growth issues in the field, monitor and correct nutrient deficiencies, and uncover the hidden hunger to drive yield. So let's look at some of the hidden hungers and the couple of examples here. This first one is with potatoes. If we follow the tissue analysis over multiple years on potatoes in Idaho, we can see that the phosphorus, zinc, and copper were more deficient. So then that means that we need to do what we can to correct those deficiencies. And so this is the hidden hunger. So we need to find ways to correct it if possible. Potato phosphorus is really important because it helps with increasing the number of tubers, boosting bulking, the dry matter content, and it also improves the storage potential. So you can see it's very critical that we have the right amount of phosphorus in the plant. With our high calcareous soils and lots of phosphorus being tied up, then it makes it harder. So a lot of times we are putting on phosphorus and trying to do it smaller amounts at a time, get it to where the plants can take it up. Here's another example with alfalfa of why it's so important to have the right nutritional levels. So your relative feed quality goes from 174 with the check up to 184. And if you have a relative forage quality that is above 180, then you can get a better price for your hay if you're going to sell it. So just having the right boron content, in this case, pushed it to where you have a better quality alfalfa product that can be sold for a more premium price. Here's an additional alfalfa example. We were able to, with a tissue test, discover that calcium was short. So we utilized Maxin calcium as a foliar product, and we were actually able to boost the yield up when we put on the Maxin calcium that was needed. So when you look at the money from putting that on, we're after getting the yield and the quality on all the examples, and so nutrition is key in making that happen. So if we review a few things, nutrient uptake, we saw that the daily uptake rates differ per nutrient. We saw that it can change with the growth stages over time. The elemental prominence means that there's different nutrients needed at different times of the year and in different quantities, like we saw with the potatoes and with the corn. We can utilize the NutriSolutions to understand the trends over time, like we did on the phosphorus and the zinc in the potatoes and the calcium for the alfalfa. Overall, we want to utilize NutriSolutions and tissue analysis as part of the whole package, thinking about how we can utilize technology and the agronomic knowledge of the crops and varieties to make decisions. So the benefit to the grower from tissue analysis, insightful agronomic advice that can increase their yield and their return on investment, or ROI. Benefits to the crop advisor from tissue analysis. It increases the trust with the grower by providing quality information about their particular cropping system, so then they can become the trusted advisor.